The auction hall stretched like a cathedral of glass and steel, its spires illuminated by the bioluminescent glow of the twin moons outside. Alien bidders lined the floating platforms above, their multifaceted eyes glinting with calculation and pride. Each one was a specimen of strength, power, and lineage, adorned in fabrics that shimmered with colors impossible to name. But among them all, the lot of the evening drew a different kind of attention. A cage suspended in the center of the hall, pulsing with a faint, iridescent light, contained the wildest entity anyone had ever dared to display. She was a girl, or at least something humanoid enough to call a girl. Her skin shimmered with shifting patterns, an unpredictable dance of light that seemed alive. Her hair floated weightlessly, writhing as though it had a mind of its own. Her eyes, large and unblinking, glowed like molten amber, scanning the room with feral intelligence. Her limbs were coiled, ready to spring in any direction, and her claws scraped against the reinforced bars, producing a sharp, resonant clink that echoed through the hall. Whispers filled the crowd. Some called her a miracle, others a monstrosity, but all agreed she was dangerous. No bidder had dared raise a hand. The aliens were cautious, too aware of the stories of those who had tried and failed to control her. Some had vanished after a single misstep, leaving only legends in their wake. The hall, despite its grandeur, vibrated with tension, every eye fixed on the shimmering cage and the figure inside. Then, unexpectedly, a hand rose. It belonged to a human, one of the few in attendance, not born of this world, not bound by its politics or customs. He was young, lean, and unassuming in a crowd built to intimidate. His uniform bore no insignia of rank or wealth, only a patch identifying him as an interstellar explorer, a human far from Earth's comforting familiarity. Yet he raised his hand with a calm certainty that silenced the murmurs before they could fully form. "Do you understand what you are attempting?" one of the elder bidders hissed, his voice slicing through the tension like a sharpened blade. His mandibles clicked in agitation, eyes narrowing with suspicion. The human's gaze did not falter. "I understand," he said simply. His voice carried no arrogance, only resolve. "And I am not afraid." A ripple of disbelief ran through the hall. Alien whispers turned into audible laughter, some mocking, some incredulous. A wild creature of unparalleled ferocity, and this human believed he could claim her? Many leaned closer to witness his next move, certain it would end in humiliation, or worse. The auctioneer, a towering figure with translucent skin revealing complex patterns of nerve and vein beneath, tapped a crystalline gavel. "Then proceed," he said, voice echoing with authority. "Raise your bid, and let us see if courage or folly drives you." The human's hand did not waver. Around him, the alien bidders adjusted their stances, some showing subtle signs of unease. His calm defiance was a challenge not just to the girl in the cage, but to every assumption held in the room. None had expected a human to act with such audacity. Few even believed a human could comprehend the danger, or possess the moral fortitude to face it. Inside the cage, the wild girls had tilted, amber eyes narrowing. She had seen many come before him, each confident in their dominance, each leaving in defeat. But this one he moved differently. There was no trembling, no hesitation. Her instincts prickled with curiosity. Perhaps, for the first time, someone in this hall would not fear her in the predictable ways. The human stepped forward, careful but deliberate. He did not carry weapons, nor did he reach for the cage. Instead, his movements were deliberate, respectful, as if acknowledging a sentience often denied to creatures like her. Alien eyes followed every step, some with skepticism, some with grudging admiration. A sudden clatter broke the silence as one of the bidders leaned forward, snorting in derision. "Do you truly think a human can tame, or even claim her? Every living being in this hall knows better." The human smiled faintly, a shadow of defiance crossing his features. "I am not here to tame her," he said, voice steady. "I am here to understand." At that, the cage pulsed brighter, reacting subtly to the cadence of his voice. The wild girl's body coiled tighter, ready to spring, yet there was a hesitation, a flicker of curiosity in her molten eyes. The audience, sensing the shift, leaned in closer. This was no ordinary auction. The stakes were far higher. It was a confrontation of courage, of instinct versus intellect, of fear versus conviction. The auctioneer raised a hand, signaling that bidding would continue, but no one moved. None dared challenge him now. Even the most powerful alien bidders recognized that the human's hand, steadfast and unyielding, carried an authority beyond mere wealth or strength. There was something elemental about his decision, a primal declaration that resonated through the hall. The murmurs of disbelief gradually gave way to tense anticipation. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if the audacity of one human could alter the rules of an entire society. And through it all, the wild girl in the cage watched, her gaze locked on him. Somewhere deep within, beneath the shifting patterns of her glowing skin and coiled energy, something stirred. Curiosity, recognition, perhaps even the faintest whisper of trust. The human's hand remained raised. And in that simple, defiant gesture, the course of the evening, and perhaps the fate of both human and alien, was irrevocably set. The hall's tension stretched taut, a living thing that seemed to pulse with every heartbeat. The human stepped closer to the cage, his boots echoing softly against the transparent floor. He did not raise a weapon, did not reach for the restraints. Instead, he moved deliberately, letting the wild girl observe his approach without threat. Her amber eyes narrowed, tracking him with a predator's precision. The low, almost imperceptible hum of energy around her cage shifted, responding to his presence. He crouched slightly, not to diminish his size but to signal intent, calm, measured, non-aggressive. Around him, the alien bidders whispered in disbelief. Some leaned forward, eager to see a human meet the same fate as countless others. They did not yet understand that he had come with a different kind of courage, one not reliant on brute force or intimidation. The wild girl snarled softly, a sound that vibrated through the bars. Her claws scraped deliberately against the reinforced material, leaving sparks of light dancing across the floor. She lunged forward instinctively, testing the barrier, testing him. The human did not flinch. Instead, he spoke in a low, rhythmic cadence, words chosen not for dominance but for resonance, even though he did not know her language. "I am not here to harm you," he said. "I only wish to understand." A ripple of uncertainty passed through the audience. Humans had long been considered fragile, incapable of confronting creatures like her. Yet in this moment, the human projected an unwavering steadiness that seemed to reach through the glow and the tension. He extended a hand, fingers open, not in command but in gesture. The wild girl tilted her head, her eyes studying him. She coiled slightly, then relaxed, a flicker of hesitation passing through her movements. No one had ever approached her with this careful audacity. The hall seemed to quiet, as if it too were holding its breath. He did not attempt to touch her directly, respecting the invisible boundary between them. Instead, he produced a small device from his belt, a compact, light-emitting orb that pulsed in sync with his heartbeat. He held it near the cage, letting it float in the space between them. The wild girl's amber eyes widened, pupils dilating. She reached toward it instinctively, claws extended, then retracted, caught between curiosity and caution. The audience murmured. Aliens who had spent lifetimes asserting dominance over others now whispered about a human who commanded attention without fear, without threat. Even the auctioneer leaned forward, his translucent features betraying a hint of intrigue. The human spoke again, voice steady, almost meditative. "I see you. I see beyond the fear they project onto you. I do not seek to control you. I seek only to understand who you are." For a moment, the wild girl froze. The energy around her seemed to stabilize, her coiled form less erratic. Her gaze lingered on him, probing, as though measuring the truth behind his words. There was intelligence in her, keen and unyielding, and perhaps something else, a recognition of intent, a spark that had never been met before. Suddenly, one of the alien bidders, tall, spindly, draped in ceremonial robes, leaned toward the human. "Do you truly believe you can command her trust? She will destroy you if you falter." His mandibles clicked in contempt. The human did not respond with words. Instead, he turned slightly, ensuring the wild girl saw his calm, unwavering presence. His actions spoke louder than any protestations. He would not flinch, he would not strike, he would not retreat. She sniffed the air, coiled once more, then slowly uncoiled a fraction, a sign almost imperceptible but monumental nonetheless. The human took another step closer, careful to mirror her movements rather than impose his own. He spoke softly again, letting the cadence of his voice bridge the gap between worlds. "I do not seek to dominate you. I only ask for your attention, for a measure of trust. Nothing more." The wild girl's tail, long and flexible, flicked once, then twice. Her claws scraped lightly against the bars, but there was no lunge. She tilted her head, observing him with an intensity that suggested consideration rather than instinct. Every subtle motion spoke of her caution, of the delicate balance she maintained between curiosity and defense. The human's eyes met hers steadily, unflinching. He did not offer fear, nor anger, nor a false show of strength. Instead, he offered patience, consistency, and a promise of respect. The energy in the cage shifted, responding not to dominance, but to the sincerity he projected. The hall, once tense with anticipation and skepticism, seemed to settle into an uneasy quiet, as if even the architecture itself acknowledged the unusual moment. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours, each movement measured, each glance weighted with meaning. The wild girl's snarls softened into low, questioning hums, her coiled body relaxing incrementally. She reached again, cautiously extending a claw toward the floating orb, then retreating, then repeating the gesture, testing boundaries without fully committing. The human mirrored her patience, maintaining his calm and deliberate stance. He had no illusions of immediate success, but he understood that trust, once earned, would be far stronger than any coercion or force. Alien society might not approve, yet he knew he had begun to bridge a gap no one else dared approach. Finally, the wild girl paused. She lowered her body slightly, her head tilting in a gesture that might have been interpreted as acknowledgement, or perhaps curiosity. It was the smallest of concessions, but in that hall filled with disbelief and danger, it was monumental. The audience leaned in, sensing the shift, aware that something profound had begun between human and wild alien. The human's hand remained calm at his side. He said nothing more, letting the silence and the shared space speak for him. The wild girl studied him, amber eyes tracking every subtle movement, no longer merely a creature of instinct, but an entity engaging with another mind. And in that quiet, tense moment, the path forward became clear. Understanding had begun, trust had been hinted at, and both human and alien knew that the challenges ahead would demand far more than courage. They would demand partnership. The hall's energy hummed with anticipation. The wild girl, coiled yet attentive, and the human, calm and resolute, faced one another across the subtle barrier of the cage. For the first time, the audience saw the possibility of a connection not bound by fear, threat, or expectation. And though no one spoke it aloud, all understood. The story was only just beginning. The human had earned a fraction of attention, but in the corridors of power, respect was never freely given. Alien leaders convened in hushed clusters, their elongated forms swaying as they discussed the audacity of one human daring to claim the wild girl. Many were outraged, seeing his actions as a deliberate affront to centuries of tradition. Some whispered of human frailty, certain he would crumble under the girl's ferocity. Others feared what might happen if he succeeded, a precedent that could destabilize their carefully ordered society. The human, aware of the scrutiny, did not flinch. He had understood from the moment he raised his hand that this path would demand more than courage. It would demand endurance, intellect, and an unwavering moral compass. He had learned patience with the wild girl, but patience alone would not convince the alien elite. They devised challenges, each more daunting than the last, to test his worthiness. The first test came without warning. He was led to a chamber suspended high above the city, a maze of translucent bridges, shifting platforms, and energy barriers. The chamber had been designed to disorient, to expose weakness, and to humiliate those who underestimated it. His task was simple in theory: reach the center platform and signal his intent to claim the wild girl. In practice, every step was a potential death sentence. He moved with deliberate caution, observing the timing of the platforms and the rhythm of the energy pulses. His mind worked as quickly as his feet, calculating trajectories and anticipating shifts. The wild girl, observing from her cage, tilted her head, following each movement with sharp, intelligent curiosity. She had begun to recognize his resolve, and her initial instinct to lash out was tempered by a new intrigue. Halfway through the challenge, a platform shifted abruptly, tilting at an angle that threatened to pitch him into the void below. A collective gasp rose from the onlookers, and some bidders muttered bets on his imminent failure. But the human adapted instantly, leaping and twisting with precision that defied the expectations of those who watched him. His muscles tensed, heart steady, mind focused. By the time he reached the central platform, he was unscathed, standing as if the challenge had been trivial. The crowd murmured in astonishment. Even the most skeptical elders could not deny the skill, focus, and determination he displayed. Yet this was merely the beginning. A second test awaited, one that would challenge more than agility. He was escorted to a chamber filled with holographic simulations of the wild girl. Each illusion moved with startling realism, some snarling, others retreating, some attempting to draw him into traps. The task was clear. He had to identify which was the real girl, without hesitation. Many bidders before him had failed, overwhelmed by deception and fear. He approached, careful to observe subtle differences, the way light refracted off her skin, the minute twitch of muscles beneath the glowing patterns, the depth of intelligence in her amber eyes. Each false illusion faltered under scrutiny, while the real girl, sensing his calm precision, tilted her head ever so slightly, acknowledging his perception. With a firm, steady hand, he indicated her. The simulation dissolved, leaving only her coiled form in the center of the chamber. Whispers rippled through the hall. Humans were clever, yes, but few could demonstrate such perceptive skill under pressure. The wild girl, now quiet, watched him with something that resembled approval, or at least recognition. She had tested him, and he had passed. Yet challenges were not only physical. Rumors had begun circulating of those who sought to exploit the girl for their own gain. Shadowy figures plotted behind the scenes, bidding their influence and power, hoping to manipulate the situation in their favor. Some alien males sought to poison the human's reputation, others to endanger him through subtle sabotage. Each threat was hidden, indirect, but persistent. The human, sensing these undercurrents, did not act recklessly. He observed patterns of behavior, noting alliances, whispered warnings, and glances that lingered too long. His mind worked to anticipate every move against him, not with malice, but with strategy born of necessity. Trust had to be earned carefully, and protection of the girl was now inseparable from the demonstration of his own competence. The wild girl, sensing the tension, began to respond more actively. She mimicked some of his careful gestures, testing the limits of his patience and reaction. Her body coiled in subtle arcs, her eyes narrowing and widening in sequence, almost as if communicating through movements. For the first time, the crowd could see a rhythm forming between them, not language, not words, but understanding that transcended speech. By the time the final trial approached, whispers had grown into audible speculation. Could a human truly navigate this labyrinth of societal expectation, physical danger, and political intrigue? The auction hall, filled with alien dignitaries, now watched with a mixture of skepticism, fascination, and reluctant respect. Many had dismissed him at the start. Now, every eye tracked his movements as though they might uncover a weakness that had not yet been revealed. The last challenge was deceptively simple. The human had to stand alone in the central platform, declaring his claim to the wild girl, while every bidder's gaze weighed down upon him. No traps, no illusions, only the full force of expectation, tradition, and judgment. The pressure was immense, but he stood firm. His gaze met the wild girl's, and in that moment, the hall seemed to dissolve around them. Amber eyes locked onto his, intelligence meeting intelligence, instinct meeting calculation. For the first time, the audience saw them not as bidder and commodity, but as two entities measuring each other, acknowledging each other's presence, and building a fragile yet undeniable connection. The wild girl's posture softened subtly. She coiled less tightly, her tail flicking in slow, deliberate arcs. Recognition passed between them, unspoken but profound. The human raised his hand, not to signal defiance, but to assert clarity of intent. "I claim her," he said, voice steady, resonant, and unwavering. The hall erupted into whispers, some incredulous, some murmurs of admiration. Alien bidders stared, some in shock, some in grudging respect. A few, quietly plotting, clenched fists and reconsidered their strategies, realizing that they faced a force neither of them had expected. The wild girl shifted, acknowledging him without fear, and for the first time, her amber gaze seemed to carry something more than instinct, a measure of trust. The human's hand remained raised, a symbol of resolve and defiance, not only to the hall but to the unspoken rules of a society built on caution, fear, and hierarchy. In that moment, the stakes had been elevated, alliances tested, and trust tentatively forged. The path ahead would be treacherous, filled with intrigue, danger, and expectation, yet the foundation had been set. The human had passed the trials of perception, endurance, and courage, and the wild girl had begun to respond in ways no one else had ever provoked. And though challenges remained, both human and alien understood that the bond forming between them was real, and that nothing in the hall could easily sever it. The auction, once a spectacle of power and dominance, had transformed into something far more profound, the tenta. The central platform was bathed in the iridescent glow of the twin moons filtering through the hall's spires. The audience waited with bated breath, alien whispers buzzing like static in the air. Every eye remained fixed on the human and the wild girl, whose coiled form seemed less tense than before, yet retained the latent power that had made others wary. The final trial was not a test of agility or perception. It was a test of judgment, courage, and connection. A bell tolled, signaling the start. The human stepped forward, his movements deliberate and unhurried. He did not carry weapons, nor did he make any aggressive gestures. He only carried the intent that had guided him from the start, understanding and respect. Around him, alien bidders tensed, ready to challenge him if he faltered, but no one dared step forward. His presence alone carried an authority that had been forged through trials, observation, and steadfastness. The wild girl's eyes, glowing amber and unblinking, followed his every step. She tested him subtly, shifting her weight, letting claws tap lightly against the platform. Her tail flicked in arcs that mirrored his movements, a silent rhythm forming between them. The audience leaned forward, captivated by the delicate interplay. Few had ever witnessed a human and a creature like her engage without fear, without coercion, and yet with such profound awareness of each other's presence. The human raised his hand toward the ceiling, a simple gesture that reverberated through the hall. It was not a signal of dominance, but of claim. Not to control, but to acknowledge partnership. His voice, steady and resonant, carried across the hall. "I stand for her, not above her. I will protect, understand, and respect. She chooses her path, as do I." A murmur ran through the crowd. Alien bidders, many of whom had intended to outmaneuver or intimidate him, now studied him with grudging respect. They had witnessed the trials, the subtle strategies, and the unwavering patience that had allowed him to earn even a fraction of the wild girl's trust. Some clenched fists in frustration, others nodded imperceptibly, acknowledging a victory that went beyond wealth or lineage. The wild girl shifted, coiling once, then uncoiling slowly, a movement that carried both power and a hint of concession. She did not bow, she did not kneel, but her eyes softened, tracking the human with something unmistakable: recognition. It was the acknowledgement of an entity who had dared to meet her without fear or force. She had tested him, observed him, and now, in her own measured way, responded. The human extended a hand toward her cage, open and steady. He did not touch her, respecting the barrier that still confined her, but the gesture was enough. She reached a claw, brushing lightly against his hand through the force field. Sparks of light danced where they made contact, as if the connection itself had ignited energy around them. Gasps echoed through the hall. Even the auctioneer, whose translucent skin had reflected the energy of the room for decades, leaned forward, fascinated. For a moment, silence fell. The hall, once filled with tension and anticipation, seemed to pause. In that quiet, every spectator understood that the balance had shifted. The human had not subdued her, had not imposed authority, yet he had earned her acknowledgement. He had navigated the trials, resisted fear, and demonstrated a moral strength that no wealth, weapon, or lineage could provide. The alien bidders slowly stepped back, their whispers softening into quiet contemplation. Some recognized the human's triumph as more than personal. It was a challenge to societal assumptions, a reminder that courage and respect could command influence where force failed. Others, secretly plotting, realized that the human and the wild girl had become an alliance none could easily manipulate. The wild girl, for the first time, relaxed fully within the cage. Her tail coiled gently, her claws resting against the bars rather than striking them. Her eyes never left him, amber orbs reflecting a mix of curiosity and the faintest trace of trust. It was not a domestication, nor was it submission. It was a choice, and in this hall of power and prejudice, that choice carried extraordinary weight. The human lowered his hand slowly, maintaining eye contact, letting the gesture speak of patience and steady resolve. The bond, delicate yet undeniable, had been forged in the crucible of trials and observation. The hall remained tense, aware that what they had witnessed was a transformation of expectations, human and alien, wild and reasoned, confronting fear and emerging with mutual recognition. The auctioneer finally tapped his crystalline gavel, the sound ringing through the spires. "The claim is acknowledged," he intoned, voice resonant and solemn. "The human bidder has demonstrated courage, discernment, and integrity. The wild entity acknowledges his presence. No further challenge will be entertained." The human exhaled subtly, not from relief, but from quiet satisfaction. The wild girl shifted once, amber eyes locking onto his, and for a fleeting instant, the hall felt smaller, the spires less imposing. They had passed the immediate trials, yet both understood that the path ahead was not without danger. Intrigues lingered in shadows, rivals plotted quietly, and the expectations of a society built on fear and hierarchy would not vanish overnight. Still, in that moment, the human and the wild girl had achieved what few could imagine: mutual respect, a tentative partnership, and a bond born of understanding rather than fear. The audience watched, some in awe, some in apprehension, but none could deny the profound shift that had taken place. As they turned to leave the central platform together, the human and the wild girl moved in synchrony, steps measured, eyes aware, ready for whatever challenges awaited beyond the hall. The twin moons cast their glow across the city, illuminating the spires and streets that would soon be witness to their emerging partnership. The hall remained silent in reverence, knowing that a precedent had been set, and that one human's audacity and patience had altered the expectations of an entire society. Their journey was only beginning.